It happened when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, but I remember what I saw vividly. My little sister and I were ready to go to bed. At that time period, we always slept on the couch together in the living room. Living in an old farmhouse that was heated by a wood stove, the upstairs got a bit cold to sleep in, and we didn't have the luxury of electric blankets back then, so therefore we slept downstairs in the living room. I remember my dad saying goodnight and turning off the light, and I closed my eyes. I opened them again a few seconds later because I hadn't heard my dad leave to go to bed yet. I was wondering why. I assumed that he would still be standing there, but when I opened my eyes, he wasn't there, and neither was my sister, who previously was awake. She was sound asleep. Maybe I had somehow fallen asleep without noticing, but I don't think so. In our living room, there was a door with glass that led to the closed-in porch, and the door was what I could see if I looked up while I was lying on the couch. That night, I looked up and saw a glowing form of a man sitting at the table on the porch. You couldn't really see anything other than his outline, and he didn't glow brightly, just sort of dimly, as if he was made out of shapeless glowing fog. As I saw him, he turned and looked straight at me. He had no face, just the same glowing fog. I was terrified and hid my face under the blankets. I kicked my sister awake. She wasn't very happy with me. Still not looking back up, I asked her if she saw it. She said she didn't, and that I should go back to sleep. I convinced her to get up and investigate, and she got up, looked around, and found nothing. Years later, I told the story to my sister, asking if she remembered it. She said yes, and then asked me if she had ever told me about the time when she had seen a ghost. I hadn't. She then told me that one night she woke up in the middle of the night and heard the TV flashing on and off. Thinking her parents were still awake, she walked into the living room. What she saw was the TV turning on and off by itself. There was no one in the room. She looked over to the couch to find the remote, to turn it off, and that's when she saw it. A ghost sitting and floating over the couch. She said it felt like she had spent hours looking at it. As soon as it turned and looked at her, she felt panicked and quickly ran and went back to bed. When she looked at the time, a minute had not yet passed since she had got out of bed. She didn't tell anyone about what had happened until years later. When she told me this, I asked her what her ghost had looked like. She then described the exact same glowing ghost that I had seen. The creepy thing is that I had never told her what the ghost I had seen looked like, just that I had seen one. Our continued conversation revealed that many details of our stories matched up. Another glowing encounter. I haven't been around for a while. I've been so busy it's hard to get free time. But finally, I can share another experience that I had just a few nights ago. It's winter here, and it's really getting cold out, especially at night. So I bundle up and sit in my car to stay warm whenever I go out for a smoke. This night was odd. I was the only one outside that I could see. It was late and dark out, and nothing but the streetlights to illuminate the parking lot. Everything was fine during my smoke. I finished it, turned off my car, and started walking back towards the dorm. I take a glance up at the smoke pit, up the small hill, and see no one out there, so I look back ahead for only a second. But in that second, I suddenly felt a presence, and I immediately looked up back at the smoke pit, and I see this hazy figure on top of one of the tables. It looked like someone wearing a hoodie and sitting cross-legged on the table, but he was completely see-through. I could see the road behind him and the grassy hills that led to the base housing area, and the lights from the streets were glowing right through him, yet they seemed dim in the haze of this figure. What freaked me out the most was that his eyes were very distinct, and they were glowing a very bright white. The figure just stared at me, and I stopped dead in my tracks staring at him. I don't know why, but I could not move at all. Finally, after what felt like hours, but it was only a few minutes, the figure began to slowly fade away until it was completely gone. I felt like I was released from some invisible chain, and I could move again, and I ran back to my dorm room and made sure everything was locked. I've been seeing strange things all my life, and I understand that this weird ability can cause spirits to be attached to me. Most of the time, I just ignore it, but sometimes there are those moments that I am petrified, and I can't even explain why. I will say this though, this is the first time I have ever seen a figure with glowing white eyes. I've seen red, blue, and a strange haze of purple, but never bright white. Has anyone else seen something like this before? Thank you for reading. Creepy story number 3. When I was 7 years old, my mother, my brother, and I lived in a small 3-bedroom house in a nondescript little town in west central Illinois. I'd been aware of the paranormal for quite some time, as we live in a house that in the 1800s has been something like an abortion center. A summer after my birthday, my grandmother bought me and my younger half-sister a glow-in-the-dark Muppet shirt that were too big for us, so instead we used them as nightshirts. I loved this shirt and wore it all the time. That fall though, after the leaves had fallen off the trees, I remember because I looked out the window. I became scared from that shirt for life. I'd fallen asleep lying in my usual spot. I had a small bedroom with a bunk bed, and I slept on the bottom bunk, my head in line with the window, but on the far side of the bed, a twin-size mattress that is. I remember waking up mentally, realizing that Bluey, my stuffed rabbit, had fallen off the bed. I had an attachment issue to him, so it was really a big deal. Still, I didn't open my eyes because I felt as though somebody was watching me. I remember through my eyelids, a bright green light in the same color as my shirt. I figured it was just my shirt, but I still wanted to make sure, of course. I pulled the covers over my head and opened my eyes. I hadn't looked at my shirt yet, but I remember the light was definitely coming from the other side of my blankets. I looked down and was shocked, only to realize my shirt was plain white. No Muppets, no glow in the dark, just a plain white t-shirt. Without removing the covers, I took the shirt off and checked all sides of it. There was still nothing there. I pulled the shirt back on, sat up, and yanked the covers down over my head so I could see. There, sitting at the end of my bed, was a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He had pale hair and dark eyes, and honestly looked a lot like myself. We stared at each other for a few minutes. There was a smug look about him as he stared at me in a rather cool way, and I looked at him with what I'm sure horror mixed with curiosity. Horror because I knew he wasn't human, and curiosity because on his impish little body was my Muppet's shirt pattern. My Muppets were glowing at me from his spectral body, and they seemed scary at that point. I tried screaming for my mom, but my throat was tight, almost like I was paralyzed or mute. I can only describe it by saying it was like I was going to cry, but never did. After what seemed like an eternity, the spirit boy crawled over to me, his hands making little indentations on the bed as his weight shifted forward, and he sat on his knees in front of me, between me and the window. He sat there for a minute, our noses maybe 3 inches apart, and then he smiled, or bared his teeth. His teeth, I remember, were normal, except that where he should have had canines, he had fangs. Fangs as in the kind big dogs have. Pointy, sharp, kind of curved, but not so much. I was still registering what his teeth were when he disappeared. Just vanished. No faded away, no transition at all. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. I felt like screaming, but still couldn't speak. About 5 minutes after he left, the Muppets materialized. Yes, just slowly appeared, where they belonged on my shirt, on my body. I was too afraid to move, too afraid of what else might be in my room, and under my bed, to go to my mom and even grab Bluey. A few weeks later, my great-grandfather, Alan, died. I've seen him 4 times since then, each time preceding a major life-altering loss. I'd also like to point out that I've moved multiple times since then. I feel him a lot, but still haven't seen him, which I'm glad for, honestly. He never grew up, at least in appearance. The time he appeared to me before my boyfriend's car accident, though, he looked sad. I saw him in the mirror in my bedroom for a few seconds, looking as though he wanted to say something, but he disappeared before either of us could. Has anybody else ever experienced anything like this little boy? I don't think he's evil or good, but just there. I don't know. Had to share this though.